Good evening, everyone, and welcome to 8/20/2022, excuse me, 2020 of Dallas Social Distancing Toastmasters. We are still virtual, and I want to go over just a couple of brief things very, very quickly. I'm going to be your meeting facilitator tonight. My name is Mark Schroeder. If you have any questions, feel free to try to reach me in the chat. With regard to some navigation hints, on the smaller windows, you will notice there's a ... Within that, you can pin someone's video, should you need to pin a video permanently for a little bit. We also use chats for voting. There is a chat button at the bottom of the screen, approximately in the center bottom, just to the left of the share screen button, which is green. That makes it easier to find. If you left click on that, it'll bring up the chat window, and you can chat to either everyone or just individual members from the pull down at the bottom of that window. Just in case, for the most part, I'm going to try to keep a lot of people muted, just to keep the noise down. We have had some instances where one or two of our speakers, you end up with garbled sound from them when you are on mute, which makes no sense. If that happens to you, feel free to take yourself back on mute and see if it corrects all of the garbled sound that you might or might not be experiencing from other speakers. Finally, of course, you have the choice up in the upper right-hand corner next to what would be the Zoom chat or participants window of choosing a gallery view or the active speaker view in order to select either the person who is actually speaking or a little bit of everybody. We are recording this meeting, and so if you do not want to be recorded, then you need to do something different with regard to your participation, because we're going to be doing that. Finally, just in order to do a quick share of our agenda tonight. Our agenda can be found on our website, which is, of course, DallasSocialToastmasters.com. If you go to DallasSocialToastmasters.com, you will find a current agenda link right here, which will bring up a copy of the current agenda, or you can also go to the member section if you happen to be a member and sit on this page. There's also a current meeting agenda right here, which is the same link, and will also bring up a similar copy of tonight's agenda to follow along. And with that, I would like to pass the meeting to our invocation and pledge, which tonight is being done by Mark Sims. Take it away, Mark.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. The theme of tonight, it's titled, What Are the Odds? Coincidences that we may come across in life. And what's driving this is that the last couple of weeks I've been flipping through a coffee table book, a Reader's Digest book titled Mysteries of the Unexplained that I inherited from my grandmother when we were dividing up her stuff after she went into long-term care. This was something I took away because I remembered that and a couple of other books of hers, spending hours just flipping through those when I was over there visiting with her. And we all sometimes experience or hear about coincidences. Nothing supernatural, but just strange things that happen. And if you think about your own experience, back when you were younger, when everyone talked on the telephone by a landline, you may have experienced the phenomena where you called someone, you didn't hear a phone ring, but they were there and they apparently had tried to call you as you were calling them. And so both of you determined the other person was there even though there was no phone to ring. Definitely it's something that can happen, but it's just kind of unusual. So every once in a while, you'll come across some coincidence that may make you wonder or say to yourself, what are the odds? And during the course of the evening, I will go over a few examples, a few from the book that I referenced, and a couple from personal experience. And it may jog your memory on things that have happened to you in the past. No guest tonight to recognize, so we will head into the introduction of the duty holders. Our timer tonight is Karen Lee. Karen, please describe your role.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. I am the timer for this evening, and tonight we'll have our two speakers, and I did not get John's time. John, what is your time for your speech?
5 to 7.
5 to 7, okay. So both you and Lee have the same timing rules for your 5 minutes. I'll give you the green card. For your 6 minutes, the yellow, and for 7 minutes, the red card. For Toastmasters, for table topics, you qualify at a minute, and then at 1 minute, 30 seconds, you get the yellow card, and then red card at 2 minutes. For evaluations, you will get the 2 minutes, the green card, yellow card at 2:30, and 3, the red card. So I will report when called upon by the Toastmaster. So back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Karen. Mark Schroeder is performing 2 duties tonight. He is posture monitor and vote counter. So Mark, please explain your duties.
Thank you so much, Mark. Let's see, as posture monitor, my job is to look for any kind of posture that you are doing that detracts from your message. While Zooming, that tends to be a little bit muted just because we don't see as much of your body as we see normally, and we're certainly not going to notice much pacing unless you happen to be giving one of the speeches where you are standing. But we're good. In general, we're looking for things that do not contribute to your message and detract from it. And so I will be making notes of those items, as well as if I can find a way of making some noise that I think would work, I will try to do that. But normally we are silent during the prepared speeches and make noise to call it immediate attention to it when possible. We may not be able to do that because I'm afraid that we have evidence that the dinging does not make it over Zoom very well. But that's going to be my job, and I will produce a report at the end of the meeting of what I have noticed. With regard to vote counter, of course, that's pretty obvious. I'm going to be counting votes. We have 2 speakers tonight, according to the agenda, and so we will have 2 speeches, 2 evaluations, and of course, table topics. We'll also have a vote for the best of the big 3. I will be counting votes for each of those contested races. When there is a tie, I will be the person who breaks the tie. You will not know that there's a tie, because if I tell you that, you will also know how I voted in order to break the tie. So I will be providing the results of those votes at the end of the meeting. Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. Our counter and our grammarian is Rob Giles. Rob, please describe your role.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toastmaster. My 2 roles are counter and grammarian. As counter, I will be listening for any crutch words such as any pregnant pauses, any long pauses that are not appropriate or part of your speech. And when I hear these things, except for during the prepared speeches, I will use this, which is a little clicker. And as Mark said, perhaps this won't come across. Hopefully it will. And just as a test, that should be what you hear when you say unless you are a prepared speaker, that type of thing. I will also be taking notes for that, and I'll give a report for that at the end of the meeting when called upon by the general evaluator. Also, I'm the grammarian, and as the grammarian, I have 2 duties. One is to introduce the word of the day. The word of the day today is dulcet.
Dulcet.
It is sweet to the taste, pleasing to the ear, or generally pleasing or agreeable. All of our meetings are incredibly dulcet. So that's an example for you. Please use this word during table topics in order to qualify. And please try to incorporate it for the rest of the meeting as well, if you can, and possibly throughout the week. I am also going to be paying attention to everybody's grammar. I'm looking for especially good uses of the English language or possibly poor uses of the English language. I will be looking for interesting phrases or words. And of course, that's very subjective. That is something that's going to be perhaps only dulcet to me, but indeed will be something that I will also take notes on and then give a report at the end of the meeting when called upon by the general evaluator. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Rob. Before we start into the prepared speeches, just a couple of examples from the book that I referenced on some unusual coincidences. This first one involved a man named Joseph Figlock, F-I-G-L-O-C-K, unusual name, who was walking down a street in Detroit in the 1930s when, according to the story, a baby fell on him from a high window, which he caught the baby. A year later, the same baby fell on him from the same window. Both he and the baby survived. Now, the source for this from the Reader's Digest book, they referenced a telephone interview with a Mrs. Figlock, apparently his wife. So draw your own conclusions, but that would strike me as a highly unusual, if very dangerous coincidence. The next one involves two twins. They were separated at birth. And then when they were 40 years old, 40 years old, in 1979, they were able to make contact with each other, compare notes about their lives, and they had a few things in common. I mean, not unusual for twins. Both were named James because they had different parents who didn't know each other. They had some law enforcement training. They both liked mechanical drawing and carpentry. Both married a woman named Linda and had a son named James. One was James, or both James Allen, actually. Both of these gentlemen had got divorced and then remarried to women named Betty, and both had a dog named Toy. So again, go figure. It's not unusual that twins have some common characteristics. And I'm sure these two gentlemen had some differences in their lives, but they at least had a few unusual similarities, especially concerning the same names of both the first and the second wives. So hopefully that is dulcet to your ears. So while you're pondering that, we will head into the prepared speeches. Our first speaker tonight is Lee King. He is going to be evaluated by Nicholas Elwood. So Nicholas, please just tell us about Lee's speech.
Thank you, Mark. Tonight, I will be evaluating Lee, and Lee will present his prepared speech titled, "What Are the Odds?" Is that the correct speech name, by the way, Mark?
No, what are the odds is the theme of the meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, I was emailed by Lee just to that you had a speech title planned for the interview. It's going to happen tonight.
Lee,
I think the topic that you were going to interview me on.
Yes, I was going to interview you, Lee. Do you have a title for the speech?
Well, what's the topic? What are you going to interview me on? And we'll use that as the title.
On your job, your employment.
Okay, so Lee's employment.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right, perfect. So tonight Lee will present his prepared speech, which is going to encompass about his employment. The purpose of the project is for Lee to speak 5 to 7 minutes and to practice the skills needed to present himself well in an interview. In this speech, Lee designed interview questions for Mark as the interviewer that are specific to his skills, abilities, and any other content he wants to practice. Though Lee designed the questions, he does not know exactly which questions will be asked by Mark as the interviewer. I'm going to be looking for poise, concise answers to questions, and the ability to recover from ineffective answers. And without further ado, Lee King, employment, Employment, Lee King, take it away.
As a quick reminder, make sure that you have Karen Lee, also known as Hot Rocks, as your timer.
All right, well, this evening, my project is to successfully complete an interview. So without any further ado, we will start the interview with Mark Sims.
Lee, I've heard you talk about your job over the years, picked up some interesting stories, but just in case everyone's not heard it, what is your job title and what exactly do you do?
I am an occupational therapist, and my job is to help people return to any functional activity that they do throughout the day. Functional, which is, generally speaking, some form of an occupation. That could be dressing, bathing, grooming, taking care of yourself, or returning to work, which may encompass driving, organization skills, any number of things that we engage in throughout the day. A lot of times it's things that we don't really think of. One thing that a lot of people tend to ask is, what's the difference between physical and occupational therapy? My typical short elevator answer to that question is that as an occupational therapist, if you need to use the restroom, my job is to help you once you get into the restroom, figure out how to get on and off the toilet, how to clean yourself, wash your hands, and get back out of the restroom. The physical therapist will help you with walking and helping you get into the restroom. So that makes for a very funny little story. If you have a physical and an occupational therapist working with you at the same time, the physical therapist's job frequently will end as soon as they push the patient into the bathroom, and I'm stuck with the person the whole time they're in the bathroom.
Okay, excellent. Well, everyone at times complains about their job. I know you work a lot, you work hard at this, but do you enjoy your job?
I really do enjoy my job. I think the one thing that I enjoy the most about the job is that there are no 2 days that are the same. Every day is different. Every patient is different. Their needs are different. And I find that the way I have to approach patients are very different. For example, through this whole COVID-19 experience, I've had a very unique opportunity to work with a lot of prisoners. The current hospital that I'm at has a contract with the Seagoville prison, which many of you are familiar, had quite a large population of COVID patients. And they went to the hospital that I'm at. And so at this time, I have had my fair share of working with prisoners, which also come with a lot of psychological issues. So in essence, I have worked a unit that serves three purposes. One, it's a prison unit. Second, it is a psych unit. And third, it is the COVID unit.
Okay. Well, even in a good situation, and that's great that you enjoy your job, I know there's probably something about it you'd like to change. What is the biggest change you'd like to make in your job?
The biggest change that I would like to make in my job would definitely be the funding through Medicare and Medicaid services. We have had an awful lot of cuts in therapy, both on the pediatric side and the geriatric side. I don't work very much kids, so I haven't really experienced a whole lot on the Medicaid pediatric side, but I've worked extensively with geriatrics. I've definitely seen the Medicare cuts. And I can tell you that at one time, there were a bunch of jobs out there. October of 2019, there were a bunch of Medicare changes that cut a lot of funding, and a lot of therapists have lost their jobs. Definitely during COVID, there was hardly any work, and really, I would have never expected that. And I don't think that we would have been as destitute if we had had better funding. But when you take funding cuts and you put on a pandemic, a lot of therapists have not been able to work for the past several months and just now going back to work. And I was one of those. I went from working almost 40 hours a week to, during the pandemic, working barely 6 hours a week, and that was being fortunate.
Okay, that's a very good point. Well, a lot of people start a job and they have their eye on their next promotion, and then the one after that, the one after that. What kind of promotion are you looking forward to?
I think the one promotion that I just really look forward to is just the opportunity to continue to grow in my field and learn new skills and just work in different settings. I have been interested in going back into pediatrics a little bit, which I started when I started working in therapy. I did a little bit of pediatrics. But I am interested in continuing my development, and I think just the opportunity to work in new settings is a promotion in of itself. I think we have time for one more question.
Would you recommend this line of work to a friend?
I think it would really depend on what my friend was wanting to seek out. If their goal is to seek out money, I would not recommend it because it doesn't pay. It pays very well, but it does not pay well all the time. If, however, it is a passion for taking care of people, learning new skills, and just adapting your way of thinking and having a job where you're constantly growing and have that desire to grow, I would definitely recommend this position. And at this time, it looks like our time is wrapping up. So thank you very much for interviewing me. And I look forward to any further questions you may have offline.
Okay. Thank you, Lee.
And back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you. That's you're a very good advocate for your job. So we definitely learned more about it tonight. Our next speaker tonight is John Vessels. He's going to be evaluated by, you may have heard of this guy, Lee King. He may have spoken a minute or so ago. Lee, would you please tell us about John's speech?
Sure. John will be working on, I cannot tell which path this is.
Visionary communication.
Okay. And the focus of his speech for this evening is understanding your communication styles. The specific purposes of this speech are as follows. The purpose of this project is for the member to learn about different communication styles and identify his or her primary style. And then second purpose of this speech is for the member to share the impact of his or her style on others. His time is 5 to 7 minutes, and his speech title is
Get the word out.
Let the Word Out. Yes.
Let the word out?
Get the word out.
Okay,
Get the Word Out.
I'll do my best. So please help me welcome John Vessels, Get the Word Out. Get the Word Out by John Vessels.
Good evening, everybody, fellow Toastmasters. Get the word out is the title of my speech, and it is a big focus of mine in my whole career because I do work IT, and a lot of times I have to get the word out about what's going on in our environment. Now, I'm working on an upgrade, and upgrades, besides a lot of work on testing and getting things configured and worked out, requires a lot of communication with a lot of people. My computer system that I administer is used by over 17,000 people in my system. So everything I do touches somebody in our company. Now, this upgrade this year is a little different from ones I've done in the past in that my base system that does scheduling, in case you didn't exactly know, it is for staffing and does scheduling of the employees. it is not getting upgraded per se. The part that timekeepers use and the schedulers use to create their schedules and get that information to our payroll system, that part's not changing. What is changing is we're getting an app. We have finally got an app that's going to be on iPhone and Android and other devices that will allow all the individual employees to go through their app to get into the system and look at their schedules, put in schedule requests, swap shifts with other staff members, and also pick up opportunities, which are open shifts that are hanging out there that the management's trying to get filled. And that presents a unique problem, because in the past when I do an upgrade, my upgrade usually just affects like the timekeepers, the ones that have to go in there and make adjustments to the program to make the employees get paid correctly. Or it may affect the schedulers that are going in and scheduling their staff for future dates so that they can keep, good staffing for all their departments. This upgrade, like I said, focuses on our online version, which we currently have. Employees can go in online anywhere they have an internet connection, or actually even through their iPhones now, and go to a web page and see their schedules and do all the functionality that I just mentioned. But this app is much easier to use. Of course, it puts everything in nice little windows and you just push little buttons. If you go to the web page on an iPhone, it's real tiny and you have to move it around. And, pinch and draw and stuff to get to do what you want to do. And that's not very user-friendly or pleasing to the employees. But this app is going to be a great help for them, so that right now one of the issues is during COVID is that we have a lot more cancellations of staff, because a lot of departments are canceling because they're not taking in like surgery patients. So the post-op surgery floors aren't having as much patient flow because less surgeries are being done right now. And it's getting better, but there for a while, all surgeries were frozen for several months. So our senior management to corporate wanted to find an easier way for those staff to go on there and find other shifts that they can pick up when they get their hours lost. So that's what the main prior goal to this upgrade is about. Like I said, the focus of this upgrade is just to introduce the app into our system. Now, usually I go in, when I do an upgrade, I communicate with all the stakeholders, the managers and the timekeepers and the schedulers, the people that use my system, and let them know what changes are going on or how to use them or what is changing. I mean, the whole system never changes, but new features and new functions will be added, and I'll talk to them and I'll communicate with them mostly by email, especially now since we have COVID. There's not going to be any public group meetings. I used to do presentations at hospitals and go to work one-on-one with different groups to teach them that. And even when I teach classes now, it's all doing a Skype meeting. I don't go have a classroom with employees, with my students in there anymore to train them. So it's all done online now. The biggest problem, like I said, this year is that getting it to the individual users, those 17,000 people that use my system on a day-to-day basis that have no real knowledge of computers. Some of them barely can look at the web page just to see their schedule, and that's on the very first page, big thing front and center when they log in. So communication with them is going to be more difficult. And what I'll end up trying to do is I will train small groups and create a champion group, so to speak, at each facility so that they can help. We call it train the trainer. So I'm going to train a group of people how to use the system, take them, and they'll be the resource at the department, because I have one other partner, Shantae, and between the two of us, we couldn't field all those people's calls if they called in. Nowadays, of course, with apps, everybody's kind of used to them and everybody kind of gets to know it and everything. So ideally, app is real simple to use. So I'm hoping that just by watching a little demonstration, or I'll make some brochures that have step-by-step instructions on how to do all the functionalities they want to do. And that's how I usually keep people maintained now. Ideally, that will get them going. And like I said, an app, this is an easy app. This isn't anything super complicated. It's like, here, this page, do what you want. It shouldn't be hard, but there's always a learning curve for every group. So between communication by email, training my trainer groups and letting people know who the resources are, and creating tip sheets and stuff that I will place on my SharePoint site for anybody in my company to get to. Ideally, the information will get out to everybody and they'll have a resource anytime they need it. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, John. Before we go into table topics, or let me back up. I'm sorry. We need to have first of all, a timers report from Karen. Karen, did our speakers qualify on time?
Yes, Mr. Toastmaster, Lee's speech was 6 minutes, 30 seconds, and John's speech was 7 minutes and 16 seconds.
Okay, great. So please vote for who you think did the best job, either Lee King or John Vessels. And please send your votes by private chat to Mark Schroeder. And just to follow up some on the thought about coincidences, okay, it's one thing to read about them in a book. It makes it a little more real to experience them. And I can think of a couple that occurred to me. Again, nothing supernatural, but just really interesting, kind of makes you pause and think. In the late 80s, I was a resident of Longview, lived and worked out there. And one Saturday night, I came into Dallas to go to a concert at Fair Park with some friends. And during the course of the evening, I went into the restroom, and there was a big crowd, so there was a line to go in there, and I was waiting. And a man behind me spoke to someone not directly in front of me, but the next person in front, asked what he had done today, and that person responded, "Well, I drove up here from Longview like you did." And I was going to let that go, except the person directly in front of me spoke up and said, "Hey, I'm from Longview." So I said the same thing, "Well, I'm from Longview." And it's not that strange that 4 people from Longview ended up at the concert, because it was pretty well attended. It was like Elton John or James Taylor, something like that. But the fact that we were all in the same line at the same time, 1, 2, 3, 4, struck me as more than a little bit unusual. Again, it's definitely possible. It did happen, but it's like, what are the odds? Another one, when I was younger, and this is probably a little less outlandish than the concert deal, is I had just finished up a Little League baseball season, and our family went to Houston on a weekend vacation and saw some of the sites around there, one of which was the San Jacinto Monument, which is a very tall building, and we went up in the elevator to the very top so we could look out. And I forget how big the elevator was, but it's not going to hold a lot of people. And in the elevator, someone called my name, and it turned out to be one of my Little League teammates from Arlington. Again, not so strange that a couple of different families from Arlington separately went to Houston for a little weekend trip, but again, ended up in the same elevator at the same time. So it was somewhat interesting. Again, probably this will jog your memory to think of some circumstances of your own where a coincidence happened and you just said out loud, what are the odds? At this point, we will head into the table topics portion, and we are very grateful to have Kim Crandall tonight substituting as table topics master. So, Kim Crandall. You're on mute, Kim.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. A few years ago, there was a movie called Serendipity, and it had to do with a couple coming together by chance. And it was a romance comedy movie. But my question is, have you ever had an experience where it's like I've met that person before? Karen Lee, have you ever had that experience?
Will someone time me, please? Okay,
There was a movie called Serendipity, and
okay.
it's a couple that by chance met. Have you ever had the experience of you actually have met someone? It's like, I've known them before, I've met them before.
The only experience that I can say that I had is something that's currently going on in my life. I had an experience where I just recently renewed my subscription to classmates.com. And this is a very dulcet experience. I was reading a biography of a person that I graduated from in high school, and he has since gone to school to become a funeral director. And he lives in Waco, or Belmead actually, where we graduated from high school. And he lives just down the street from where we grew up. But he became a funeral director, and there was an experience. I'm not going to relay all of the details, but it had to do with a classmate of ours that died recently, or died, well, she died a long time ago, but he didn't put the name of the person in the message, but I was able to recall this classmate's name, and I sent him a private message. And so we've since been texting and also communicating on the phone. And that's the extent of the relationship so far. So back to you, Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Karen. I guess in any situation, there's always going to be times when, you know, you do the best that you can, you prepare. Maybe things don't always go right, but sometimes you just have an experience where, you know, maybe you go through a day and it's like, I feel like I've done this before. Or a sense of maybe, I don't know, somebody might call it deja vu, but have you ever had the experience of you going through a day and then maybe it's like, I've done this before? What about you, Rob Giles?
Thank you very much, Madam Topic Master. I'll have to say that I don't really, other than the repetitive work day by day, doing the same thing over and over again, those are the types of things. But for me, it's really kind of almost a reversal that sometimes I have dreams and I think that actually happened before. And it's kind of a strange feeling when you wake up, you know, whether it's in the middle of the night or whether it is in the morning, and you recall your dream, and you have a familiar feeling inside of you, something that makes you think, oh, I've done that before. And I have had times where I hear the phone ring in my head because I've heard it ring at work, day after day after day. Those aren't the type of, that's not the type of deja vu that I'm talking about. But the reversal of having a dream or a nightmare that represents something that I at least think I have experienced before. And that's probably the biggest thing for me. Now, when that occurs, definitely, it's definitely a moment that is filled with dulcet. It's something that I look forward to, partly because I don't have a lot of dreams to begin with, or at least not that I recall. And because of that, I cherish all of the dreams that I do have, and even nightmares. I want something that's going to keep my brain going, and I recognize all of the mechanics that are working on in my head that I can wake up and feel in some way invigorated one way or another. So that's kind of the deja vu that I think I've experienced and I recall. I don't really remember anything in the opposite where I've done something and remember it from the time before, at least not that I can recall. And that could be a brain function as well. Back to you, Madam Topic Master.
Oh. Kim, do you have some additional questions?
She's on mute.
Kim, you're mute.
Sorry, I've been trying to take you off mute.
Thank you, Rob. Sometimes, there's any number of people that we interact with in a given day, but part of good communication is being aware of somebody's maybe sense or feelings, or have a sense of what a person's, where they're at the moment. So, Dagan, I know you work with a lot of different people at your job, and being in management, have you ever had the experience where maybe you've been able to do something because you've been able to understand maybe where that, just because of working with people all the time, but being able to understand maybe somebody was having a particular issue or something that was going on that maybe you were able to help them because you were able to maybe understand, because you're aware of working with the people? Dagan?
Dagan, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you, Dagan.
Hello? Hello?
There we go. We got you.
Okay. All right, start over. All right, so yeah, so working in management, since you have people working under you, you have to be, you have to think about those things about how people are, because if something's going on with somebody in their personal life, that's going to affect the work that they do. So you got to be kind of mindful of that. You can't just, if they're performing poorly, you just can't snap at them. You got to learn exactly what's causing that issue. And if you know what the issue they're having, then you can work with them, through that process and, understand the process and help them to get to to the point where they need to be to perform at a better, better pace, of, better way. So that's, so like I said, yeah, you just got to be able to understand people's personal lives, and like me personally, I try to leave my personal life out, outside of work, because I realize, personal life does affect your work sometimes. So if you can leave that out the door when you walk into work, it's a lot better. But some people just can't do that. So you just got to be able to work with them, and you kind of grow with them and make them better. And when it comes to communication styles is it's all about communication style too. Because if you have a kind of authoritarian communication style, nobody's going to be able to work with you and listen to you, and you can't work with them that way. So you got to be an open type of communication style too as well. So hopefully that's dulcet to your ears. And back to you, Table Topic Master.
Kim, you're on mute.
I think she's frozen too.
I'm trying to unmute her. Ooh, at the moment she has completely dropped.
I see 2 Robs.
Kim is back. Unmute. All right, Kim, you should have it.
Okay.
Yes.
It says my internet is unstable, so there's an
Yeah,
issue.
that explains the camera.
I do have one last question. This week I had an experience where I was at the grocery store, and normally I just take my time. I'm not really in a hurry. I just check things out and trying to figure out what I want to get. But it wasn't really urgent, but I just felt that I should leave the store. And I was getting ready to leave the store, and a guy next to me told me that I had a flat tire. And so I ended up trying to go to where I normally go. And I ended up going to a place, and if I'd gone much further, I probably would have had a lot of damage too, because it was a few miles away. So my question is, Nicholas, have you ever had an experience where maybe you've been prompted to do something or felt like you should do something? And what happened?
Right. Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. So there have been numerous times, I think, where I have had to either manually step in and take action, or have thought about taking action, but maybe it wasn't the right time to take that exact action. I think there was one time where I was actually in college in Charleston, South Carolina, and what actually happened was that it was just something so simple, right? There was a teacher or professor from the art school that had came down the stairs. He walked right outside the building, and unfortunately the streets, the sidewalks in Charleston are very jagged and are elevated because of trees growing their roots, and it's just difficult. Sometimes you don't see it and you slip and fall, and that's exactly what happened. He slipped, he fell, and dropped all of his materials for that day and the next day, and I felt terrible. It's happened to me before, so, and I think it's happened to everybody, so I know how they feel. So me wanting to sound and look as dulcet as possible to that professor, I went and helped him and picked up all of his materials. And I think at the end of the day, he was very grateful. I was very grateful, and everyone was just one big happy family. Back to you, Madam Table Topics Master.
I don't know, did we lose her again?
I think so.
Nice nose, John.
I'm checking. She went from on mute to off mute. I think she's back. Kim, are you back?
Okay. Our timer, did everybody qualify on their time?
Yes, Kim, everybody qualified on time.
Okay. And grammarian.
Madam Topic Master, all contestants used the word of the day. It was a very sweet, very dulcet table topics.
And back to you, Mr. President, Toastmaster.
Do a
Let's
quick
do a
call.
vote.
Quick call for a vote, please.
How about for the best of the big table topics?
Yes, please.
Okay. Vote for your best table topics first.
And of course, those votes go to me, Mark Schroeder.
And the contestants are Karen, Rob, Dagan, and Nicholas.
Thank you. At this point, I don't have any further remarks concerning the theme, so we will enter into the evaluation portion of the meeting. So let me please introduce Dagan Newland, now our general evaluator.
All right, thank you, Mark. So as general evaluator, I evaluate the meeting as a whole. Also call upon the evaluators to give their evaluation, and also call upon the duty holders to give their report as well. So we're going to do the evaluators first, and so the evaluators can give their evaluations. And our first evaluator is going to be Nicholas, who was evaluating Lee Keen's speech. So take it away, Nicholas.
Great. Thank you, Dagan, fellow members, and especially Lee for your interview tonight. I thought it was really thought out and it was executed very well. It was a great speech. For the speech tonight, I'm going to evaluate him based upon the 3-2-1 method that we so famously use. So 3 things that I liked from your speech, Lee, was firstly, the very beginning of the speech. There was a great initial question asked by Mark, and it was straight and to the point, very relatable to the topic at hand. And that was, what is your current occupation? And then you proceeded to actually answer that question with a lot of detail. So I like that. I also really liked the description that you gave of being an occupational therapist. It was really humorous and detailed. When you had mentioned that, for that example, when you were stuck in the bathroom with one of your patients or clients as an occupational therapist, it was humorous and it was supposed to be funny. So I like that. I also really liked the question and answer about when Mark asked, what about your job would you like to change? And then you went and detailed the Medicare and / Medicaid and the need for reform in that sector. And I believe you had mentioned the example of cutting funding that Medicare or the federal government was doing for this program, and it was needed to be reformed. 3 things actually that I thought you could just improve upon. I thought that the answers that you gave were a little bit monotone. I think that you could have put a lot more emphasis in the way that you were responding to Mark's questions. So just, a quick improvement there. And I would have also loved to hear an example or a story about when you spent times with the prisoners that you discussed, or actually, or a COVID story. I thought the prisoners example that you mentioned was really interesting. So I thought you could have gone in more detail on that. Lastly, I just thought the title needed to just be a little bit more compelling. We generated it at the last minute. So I think that was just a quick change we could have done. And then lastly, one really good thing that I really liked about the speech is having the story about, having the example about working with the prisoners was really powerful. That's something that was really unique to me and just was not common. And it was just something that I hadn't really heard before. So I really appreciated that. And thank you again, Lee, and back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Nicholas. We'll now move on to our next evaluator, which is Lee Keene, who is evaluating John Vessel's speech. So take it away, Lee.
John, thank you for a great speech this evening. And we definitely have a very good understanding of what you do at work now through your speech. I thought that you gave us a very good detailed description of your current project, some of the challenges that we're going to face, and how you're going to overcome those challenges. So I really feel like if you were giving this speech to a potential employer or even within your company, you'd have a very good understanding of how you plan to communicate with other people and what you're working on. The one thing that I really feel like, or the one area that I feel like you could really improve on, is perhaps a little honing in a little bit more on the objectives, because you had two objectives. One objective was to share with us your communication style, and then the second objective was how that impacts other people. And I felt like there was a disconnect there. While you talked about how you are rolling out this project and how it is needed and the challenges and how you're going to overcome those challenges, I didn't really feel like you really told us specifically what is your communication style and how is that impacting other people. Or is there something about your current communication style that perhaps is being challenged or hindering the process of rolling out this project, and how are you going to overcome that? Or something of that nature. Just having a stronger understanding of your communication style. How is it impacting other people? How are other people impacted by your communication style? Other than that, very good speech, very well planned, and great description of how this project is unfolding and the importance of the project. Definitely, if someone was needing an explanation when it comes to funding, I do feel like they would be more out to fund the project after hearing your speech than perhaps before. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
All right, thank you, Lee. So now I will give my evaluation of the meeting as a whole. And of course, first we started a little bit late, but that's okay. We was trying to get Kim connected there. So I understand that, and I know being at a Starbucks, sometimes the internet could be a little tricky sometimes, especially if maybe multiple people are trying to do a lot of stuff. But that's okay. Although maybe we could have asked maybe somebody else to. I know we asked Kim at the front to be table topics, but since he was having issues, maybe we could ask somebody else, maybe even as a backup to Kim, just in case. As for the speeches, I know we had one speaker, then Lee stepped up to give a speech, so thank you for that, Lee. And I learned a lot, good stuff about your job and what you do during your speech, so I thought that was very interesting. And of course, John, I already know about your job and what you do, but But the app that y'all just got created, it's really I'm thinking about time that y'all had an app, because with all this technology nowadays, it's kind of, I think y'all behind the times actually on that one, but it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to have an app like that, and it'll make it much better for the employees to do what they need to do. As for table topics, I know we had little issues there with Kim's internet, but I think she had some pretty good questions that everybody could answer. And the in the word of the day it could be used easily. Of course, that's a really good word of the day, by the way, Rob. As for the evaluators, Nicholas, right up front, you gave us the method, the 3-2-1, and you had good points on both things that were good with the speech and things that you needed to improve on. So that was really good. Lee, I don't recall you giving the method, but you also had the good points. Both good things and things that could be improved on. So good job to both of y'all for the evaluator section. So that kind of wraps it up for my evaluation of the meeting. So we'll move on to the duty holders. Our first duty holder is going to be our posture monitor, Mark Schroeder. So take it away, Mark.
You didn't hear the dulcet tones of that very much tonight, because although I have a few things to report on, they are minor and not really bell-worthy. Although bell-worthy probably has an entirely different meaning. We won't go with it. We won't worry about that. Let me report on what I did notice. Lee, first of all, you continue to have probably one of the best sets of facial expressions. The smiles in particular during the discussion of your job and the interview questions I thought were very, very good. And I particularly liked the way you were using gestures and smiling around the bathroom analogy. That was particularly good. You clearly enjoyed the analogy yourself, which came across very well. John, let's see. Very good eye contact throughout your entire speech tonight. So that was one plus. I also like the way that you used your fingers when you were describing the app and having to do the zooming, etc. So if you happen to go back and look at the video, you will notice that. The one thing that I did notice, and I didn't notice a whole lot of people doing it, but I have come to think about it in past weeks, noticed it. The equivalent of walking back and forth or pacing back and forth on Zoom seems to be spinning back and forth in our spinning chairs. And I noticed just a teeny bit of that from you, John, tonight. Not to the extent that I did it or the extreme that I did it, but just a little bit. So that's kind of the equivalent that we have here. Mark Sims, I like the way you used your hands in particular as you were describing the events in Longview and also with regard to the elevator. I think if I remember right, well, a lot of people have got the same sort of problem that I've got, which is you've got to get your hands really, really high in order to see them. A lot of the times, if I can get them just about right, we see bits and pieces of your hands, but we don't see all of your hands. And that's true for many of our speakers tonight. If you don't happen to have yourself in view, sometimes that can be very difficult. Let's see, I also noticed for Rob, as always, you probably had your hands highest of all and on screen more often than anybody else. So great job, particularly when you're just describing the dreams. For what it's worth, I kind of have something very similar. I actually have dreams that then I feel like I'm reliving those dreams during the day as opposed to the other direction. And it's like, that's too familiar. And I finally realized over the course of the day that yes, it was something that I had dreamed before. Dagan, let's see, what did I notice for you? I think one of the ones that I liked in particular was you had a motion that was like this. I wrote it as bowling ball, but it was basically this kind of motion as you were describing something. I thought that was very effective. And again, your hands, a lot of your hands, you've got, we see a couple of fingers on the edge of the screens, but not any higher than that. Nicholas, for whatever reason, whatever is different in your environment, it looks like we are seeing maybe a little bit more of you, maybe a little bit lower. So we saw more of your hands tonight. That was a feature. The one thing that I kind of noticed is you may be leaning. So we are seeing a little bit of what look like hunched up shoulders compared to normal because you may be leaning on your elbows. you did not, in that sense, you just don't appear as relaxed when you're in that position. So just be careful of that. And finally, the one thing that I noticed, Lee, I certainly would not have dinged you on this because you would never have had a clue what I was dinging you on. But during your evaluation, I happened to notice that the cat was licking itself over your right-hand shoulder, our camera left. It was a touch distracting. There's not much you can do about it. That concludes my report as posture monitor tonight.
All right, thank you, Mark. Yeah, that's a little bit was funny. So I need to backtrack and call upon a timer's report for the evaluators. Did everybody qualify on time?
Yes, Mr. General Evaluator, everyone
All right.
on time.
All right, thank you. So if you haven't already, please vote for the best evaluator, whether it be Nicholas Elwood or Lee King. And remember to send those private chat to Mark Schroeder. All right, let me send mine real quick. All right, there we go. All right, now we'll move on to our next duty holder, which is our counter, Rob Giles, and grammarian Rob Giles. So please do your reports, please, Rob.
Thank you very much, Mr. General Evaluator. We had a pretty active night tonight, and I'll go through the things I found. Most of it was in regard to odds and ums as the odd counter. I caught Lee, surprisingly, with one That's not crazy or anything, but for Lee, that's hard to find sometimes, so that's why I mention it. John, during your speech, you had one you also cleared your throat, and I was maybe guessing that you were having some nasal issues, maybe some allergies or something like that. But you cleared your throat at one point. You had a couple of so's. You did use this same phrase a few times. Now, using it once or twice is fine, but you went on to like 3 or 4 times where you said, like I said, like I said. And it's in reference to prior things, but maybe change that up after you get using it a couple times. I did, as grammarian, I did like the phrase champion group. Just struck a chord with me, so I appreciate that. Thank you. Kim, during your stint as topic master, you had a couple of ums, and you had a series of sentences that were in conjunction with but. They're usually conjunction but, I should say. So you would say a sentence, but, say a sentence, but, say a sentence. So think about that for future meetings. Table topic contestants, all were pretty clean except for you, Dagan. And I may have clicked you just once for an but you have another phrase that you also used as general evaluator considerably, and that phrase is, you know. That was almost the beginning of almost, I don't want to say every sentence that you had, but a lot. So if you maybe want to go back and look at the video once we're done here, just to get an idea, because I think that's going to be more impactful for you. And I'm not sure exactly why it was much more proficient or much more proliferate today as opposed to prior times, but take a look and maybe you can figure it out. Just something to look at. Nicholas, during your evaluation, you had a couple of you knows and an You did have a phrase that was grammatically incorrect. You said when you were talking about the 3 things that you were going to talk in positive nature about Lee's speech, and you said 3 things from your speech was, and it should have been were, and then proceeded on with those 3 things. In that same vein, Lee, you also had a tense issue with one of your verbs where you said the way I approach a patient are very different. And either you change it to patients or you change that to is. So it was just a matter of changing either the verb tense or the plurality of that particular subject. I did note that in addition to all of our table topics contestants using the word of the day, our Toastmaster also used the word of the day, dulcet. And I don't recall anybody else using it, so forgive me if you used it. I appreciate it. I just did not catch it. And that is pretty much it. I do want to say this. I love the title for John's speech, Get the Word Out. It's just a great phrase in my mind. So thank you very much for that, John. And back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
All right, thank you, Rob. So that will conclude this portion of the general evaluations. And I will now call upon the vote of the big three. So remember, the big three are the Toastmaster Mark Sims, our table topic master Kim Crandall, or general evaluator me, Dagan Newland. So please vote to Mark privately to Mark Shorter of who you think the best of the big three is tonight. And I will now turn it over to our president, Mark Sims.
Thank you, Dagan. This is the business portion of the meeting. We do not have any guests tonight, but I do want to note an educational award. So I noticed that, John, I believe you have achieved VC Visionary Communication 1, 2. Okay, excellent. Thank you for your dedication. And I also want to remind everyone that we have a speech contest coming up, a speech and evaluation contest coming up September 10th. We have 2 contestants for our speech evaluator, that being Rob Giles and Lee King. And I've reached out to our area director, Mary Gomez, to ask about a guest speaker. And she relayed that request on, I think, to the district leadership. So we have to see what, if anything, comes of that. But hopefully we can get a guest speaker in to give a speech that Lee and Rob could evaluate. One way or the other, we'll have someone. And we definitely need humorous speakers. And humorous speeches are challenging, but they're a lot of fun. I mean, you get to step away from normal presentations, normal rules, so to speak. You can just really cut loose, have some fun with it. So please, I would encourage anyone, even if you have a little bit of an interest, to think of something funny and go for it. Because you can never tell what the judges or what the crowd you speak to will go for. I mean, what you think, wasn't that great? Wasn't that funny? They may laugh at, or your best laugh lines may get just straight faces, stony faces. So it is an adventure, and it's a way to push the envelope in your own speaking lives. So please do get back with me if you have any interest in being a humorous speech contestant. And again, that is September 10th. So we are getting relatively close to that. Today is the 20th. So that is only 3 weeks away. So, and definitely, I would imagine that the format of the meeting would be similar to what we did last time, pretty much a normal meeting, only with the guest speaker, we'd have the 2 evaluations, and then we would have these speeches. And so we will just see how this plays out. But if you have any interest whatsoever in volunteering for a specific role, or to give a speech, or even if you want to try your hand at the evaluation competition, please do let me know. And I think it was last week or week before last, we had the officers meeting and we discussed dues. We didn't have a clear resolution. I believe that we were going to get some additional information on our expenses, just to see what the different due scenarios. And
I was one of the people responsible for doing that, and it slipped my mind. I will get that to you tonight.
That's excellent. No, that's fine. And if you could email that to us, because other than that, we know what the expense of the room is. And it would just be a matter of projecting the number of times we think we would be there in the next due cycle. And then, of course, making an estimate of the membership total, and then throwing in the expense for the Toastmasters International dues. we could again resolve that in the near future. Don't have to do that tonight. Let me see. And this is getting late in August. I would assume that we're still not confident enough about the public health situation to get into zonas next month. I would assume that, just me thinking out loud, that through September we would still be meeting virtually.
Our original plan was that we at least wanted to get to a minimum of yellow, if not to green. A lot of people wanted to get to green. We are not at yellow. The numbers have been going up. The numbers, we will not get 14 days before we're already into September. So I suspect that is the case.
That is very discouraging. You would think we could do better, but one of these days we'll be through this or have vaccines or herd immunity or whatever. Or maybe we'll all morph into zombies as a result of the COVID-19. I don't know. Does anyone else have any additional business to bring up? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to ask Mark Schroeder to please present us with the winners of tonight's competitions.
Thank you so much, Mark. All right, we will start with best speaker tonight. Our best speaker tonight, John Vessels. Congratulations. Table topics. Our best table topics respondent tonight. That award goes to Nicholas Elwood. Congratulations, Nicholas. The evaluator for tonight. We have another duplicate. It's going to go to Nicholas again. So Nicholas has run both table topics and evaluator tonight. Great job. Finally, best of the big three. Best of the big three tonight. The award winner for that is going to be Dagan Newland. That concludes the awards. Congratulations, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you to the winners tonight. And thanks to everyone for pitching in and helping us to fill all the roles, and especially those who stepped up at the last minute, Lee and Kim. I hope y'all have a really terrific weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, you too. Everybody be safe. Unmute yourself, Schroeder. Unmute yourself, Schroeder.
Oh, thank you. If we're done, I will stop the meeting in 3, 2,